My boyfriend told me his mistress was better than me in every way and expected me to move out so she could move in. Now, he is begging me to save him. My boyfriend Kevin told me his mistress Lori was better than me in every way during dinner at our apartment in February. He said it casually while eating the pasta I'd made, like he was discussing the weather. He said Lori was more fun, more attractive, more successful, and definitely better in bed. I asked him if he was really telling me about his affair this way. He shrugged and said it wasn't really an affair since we weren't married, and he'd been planning to break up with me anyway. He said he just wanted to be honest about why our relationship wasn't working. I asked how long this had been going on, and he said 4 months, which meant he'd been sleeping with her since before Thanksgiving. He said he would have ended things sooner, but he needed someone to split rent with until Lori's lease ended in March. I sat there stunned while Kevin explained that Lori was everything I wasn't. She was spontaneous while I was boring. She was ambitious while I was complacent, and she understood him while I just nagged. He said he'd been miserable with me for over a year, but stayed because leaving seemed like too much work. He actually thanked me for being so predictable that he could easily schedule time with Lori without me noticing. I asked him why he was telling me this now, and he said Lori's lease was up next week, so she'd be moving in here. He expected me to move out by then since the apartment was in his name, even though I'd paid half the rent for 2 years. He said he'd already told Lori she could have the bigger closet that I was currently using. Kevin then pulled out his phone to show me pictures of them together like I'd asked to see them. He scrolled through photos of them at restaurants I'd wanted to try, concerts he'd said he was too tired to attend with me, and weekend trips he'd claimed were work conferences. He seemed proud of how well he'd managed the deception and said I should be impressed by his organizational skills. He even showed me the separate calendar he kept to track his lies and said it was exhausting maintaining 2 relationships. I asked him if he felt bad at all, and he laughed. He said why would he feel bad about upgrading to someone better? He said I should be grateful he was being honest instead of just ghosting me like he'd originally planned. He said Lori had convinced him to tell me the truth because she wanted to redecorate without my stuff in the way. The next day, Kevin went to work expecting me to start packing. Instead, I started making phone calls. First, I called Kevin's mother Diane, who adored me and had no idea about Lori. I told her everything Kevin had said, word for word, including the part about me being boring in bed. Diane was horrified and said she'd raised him better than this. She said she'd been planning to give Kevin his grandmother's engagement ring, but now she'd rather throw it in the ocean. Then I called Kevin's boss, Robert, who was also his mentor. Robert had helped Kevin get promoted twice and thought of him like a son. I mentioned that Kevin had been using his company credit card for dates with Lori, which I knew because I'd seen the statements he carelessly left on the counter. Robert said that was a fireable offense and he'd need to investigate immediately. I also called our landlord because the apartment wasn't actually in Kevin's name like he'd claimed. We were both on the lease, which meant he couldn't just kick me out. I told the landlord that Kevin was planning to move in another person without permission, which violated our lease agreement. The landlord said if Kevin wanted changes to the occupancy, everyone would need to reapply and qualify individually. Next, I contacted Lori directly through social media. I told her I was happy to move out, but wanted to warn her about a few things. I mentioned Kevin's credit card debt that he'd hidden from both of us, his gambling problem that drained his savings, and the medication he took for a persistent fungal infection he'd claimed was cured. I said I just wanted her to be informed since Kevin believed in total honesty now. Lori messaged back asking what fungal infection and what gambling problem. Turns out Kevin had told her he was financially stable and perfectly healthy. I also mentioned that Kevin had described their intimate life to me in detail and compared us extensively, which made Lori furious because she thought that was private. By evening, Kevin's life was unraveling. His mother called him screaming about disrespecting women and said he was no longer welcome at Easter dinner. His boss called him into an emergency meeting about misuse of company funds. The landlord called saying there had been a complaint about unauthorized occupants, and Lori called him crying, saying she couldn't believe he'd shared intimate details about her with his ex. Kevin came home panicking and asked what I'd done. Full story on channel, link below.